Are you ready for your next great Civil War read? Then try the new historical novel, The Heavens Falling, by Jonathan Lucci. Follow the members of the Dawson family through the Civil War, from the halls of Congress to the bloody fields of battle, and from the decks of gunboats to the solitude of Lincoln's office. The Heavens Falling is available on Amazon in paperback and Kindle, or visit theheavensfalling.com to order. That's theheavensfalling.com.
This episode of Addressing Gettysburg is brought to you in part by me, audiobook narrator Mike Scott, narrator of Savis Beattie's Bloody Autumn, the Shenandoah Valley Campaign of 1864, and Unlike Anything That Ever Floated, the Monitor and Virginia and the Battle of Hampton Roads. If you are an author or publisher interested in having your titles produced as audiobooks, or even just in learning more about the process, give me a shout. You can find my contact info on my website, MikeScottVoice.com. That's MikeScottVoice.com.
Want the freshest cup of coffee in Gettysburg? Then visit Bantam Roasters, formerly 82 Cafe at 82 Steinware Avenue. They roast all of their coffee in-house, and they have a full coffee bar to keep you caffeinated during your trip. Visit them at www.raggededgerc.com for their menu and shipping options for all of their freshly roasted coffee. Use promo code Hancock for 10% off your order in the cafe.
Hi, this is Bruce Boxleitner, and you're listening to Addressing Gettysburg.
Gettysburg Museum of History Studios. You're listening to Addressing Gettysburg.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to this episode of Addressing Gettysburg's Ask a Gettysburg Guide. And today we're trying something a little different. By the time you hear this on the audio version, it's going to make no difference to you. But just for the people watching now live on YouTube, this is something that we are going to, or I'm trying to do. This is an experiment, if you will, because it's a new feature that I'm thinking of offering for the first lieutenant level on Patreon and the soon-to-be colonel level on YouTube once I open subscriptions on YouTube. And the idea is basically that if you get on those levels, you get to watch a live recording session of an Ask a Gettysburg guide, and then you get to participate in it by submitting your questions live and in real time. The idea is going to be actually that you're going to call in. We'll have the number set up. You'll call in and be able to ask the guides directly whatever question you want. And the idea is, you maybe get a conversation going with the guide. So let's say your question is, how tall was Dan Sickles? And the guide gives you the answer. And in the answer, another question comes to your mind. Well, you're on the phone with him. You can ask him or her the question right then and there, and I think that would make for a more interesting show. It's just a little something extra to not stagnate on the format of the show and kind of get a little audience participation, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So that's the idea. This is an experiment. I don't know if it'll actually work. It's kind of hard to do when I don't have someone in the control room running all that stuff, and I have to host the show and do the technical stuff. So we'll see how it all works. But this is the idea, at least, and this is the test version of that. Okay, so let's get on with the show now, as we promised. Today we're talking about the 20th Connecticut. Everybody knows about the 20th Maine. You would think that with the obsession of the 20th Maine, or over the 20th Maine, that it is the only regiment at Gettysburg. Well, period, that it's the only regiment at Gettysburg, but it's not. But if you knew there were more than one regiment at Gettysburg, then you would think it was the only one with the number 20 in front of it. But that is not the case. There's plenty of them, and one of them is the 20th Connecticut. So joining us today is licensed battlefield guide Jim Connery. Your first time on the show, Jim.
It is.
Welcome.
Thank you.
And tell us a little bit about yourself before we get into it.
How far back shall we go?
Just, what did you do? Are you retired?
I'm retired CPA.
Retired CPA. Okay, very nice.
My accountant.
Your accountant?
Yeah.
Oh, okay, good. And you're not taking on any more clients, are you?
No.
Damn it. I need somebody to really guide me.
He's looking for somebody to perform tax evasion.
Yeah, not evasion. No. Shelter.
Avoid
tax shelter.
Right.
My practice was in Connecticut, and so I let that license lapse.
Oh, okay.
When I moved
so you
to
can't
Pennsylvania.
Advise someone?
Excuse me?
You can't advise someone?
Nope, not for compensation.
Legally, you can't.
Not for compensation. Nope.
Well, all right, then do it for free. All right, and when did you become a licensed guide?
2003.
2003. Oh, so you've been at this quite a while now.
Yes,
20
my
years.
21st year now.
Yeah, good for you. Okay, cool. And then joining him is his buddy, apparently, and client, Carolyn Ivanoff.
Former.
Oh, former client, excuse me.
Former client.
How you doing, Carolyn?
Oh, I'm great.
This has been the year of Carolyn Ivanoff. You've been on the show quite a few times.
So
You've been on.
I really enjoy it.
You've been on That's What She Said, our upcoming spin-off show
Right.
about women's history and the Civil War.
Right.
So this is going to be pretty good here. People are going to really get to know you through
hope
Addressing
so.
Gettysburg, and that's nice. All right, so we're talking about the 20th Connecticut.
Yes.
Tell us a little bit about them at the Battle of Gettysburg. Go ahead into their background, though.
Yeah,
we
let's do
should go
that.
back
Yeah.
to the beginning, if
Yeah.
you don't mind, because a couple of the key players in running the 20th Connecticut were named William Burr Worcester, who at this battle was the licensed. I'm sorry, yeah,
He was a licensed battlefield guy?
lieutenant colonel, and his adjutant was a Major Philo Buckingham.
Philo Buckingham.
And he's out of Seymour, Connecticut.
Correct.
Worcester was out of Derby, Connecticut.
Okay, all right.
And
So when we talk about this, we're talking about the Naugatuck Valley, the Brass River. It's now, we're considered valley people, right, Jim?
Yes, we are.
We're from the same hometown. We went to the same schools, went to the same high school. Some years apart, not that many, but and we worked in Shelton our whole lives. So a lot of the guys that we're going to talk about with this 20th Connecticut were our neighbors. We know their relatives.
Okay.
Jim is a descendant of Colonel Worcester.
Oh,
really? That's
yeah.
not a direct line.
Not direct
Okay.
line, yeah.
I'm connected to him
By marriage?
through the Burr family tree.
Yeah,
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Are you related to Aaron Burr?
He's on one branch.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh, wow. So
Worcester's
your
on
family
another
goes
branch,
way
and
back.
I'm hanging off a third branch.
Hanging.
Hanging, yeah.
He's hanging.
By a
okay.
thread.
Yes.
By a twig.
Yeah,
He's
yeah,
holding
yeah,
onto
yeah.
a twig.
by a marriage.
The twig, yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
And so, where we're from in Shelton is the old Naugatuck Valley. We're valley people, and it's an interesting community. But as I said, these guys from the 20th Connecticut, we know where their houses were. We know their descendants. Some of the streets are named after them. So,
Oh, that's cool.
we're all hometown boys, right?
Yeah.
And girls.
And girls.
Yeah, don't forget the girls.
Yeah, don't forget
Get in
don't
trouble for
forget
that.
the ladies. Oh yes, Veronica and
Yeah, Veronica
Bethany
will
would
go
not
nuts.
be happy.
No, sir, Bob.
Okay.
All right, so when are they mustered in?
The regiment organized in the late summer of '62,
Okay.
along with so many other regiments that Lincoln called for, and they were supposed to go in for 3 years or the duration of the war.
Mm-hmm.
And they organized at a place called Oyster Point in New Haven, which today we know as Pond Point in West Haven, Connecticut.
Okay.
Had a tremendous service, of course, a typical mustering service with a lot of speeches and flag waving and so on, a presentation of swords. And then they marched over the hill and boarded the train and headed south.
And that would be down to Washington
Yes.
first, right?
Yes.
And then what was their first duty?
Well, they would spend the winter getting organized. Their immediate bivouac, I believe, was right by the Capitol building and eventually across the river to the Alexandria area. And then I read somewhere back in time that they spent the winter out at Boulevard Heights.
Oh, okay.
Outside of Harper's Ferry. Mm-hmm. And then in the spring.
But this would have been post Antietam, right?
Yes,
So
they
They
did
missed
that.
Antietam.
Okay.
They missed Antietam,
and they missed
Fredericksburg.
Fredericksburg, yeah.
Right.
because they're still training and organizing and
Yes.
everything.
And
Gotcha.
so
what's
they-
their first?
In March, they were sent south to join the Army of the Potomac at Falmouth across the river from Fredericksburg. So their first action is the Battle of Chancellorsville.
Jeez.
Yeah.
And they're in the 12th Corps?
They were assigned to the 12th Corps. Now, when the regiment was organized, it was under the command of a colonel by the name of Samuel Ross. But as soon as the regiment joined the 1st Brigade of the 1st Division of the 12th Corps, Ross moved up to brigade staff, leaving Worcester in charge of the regiment.
And he was a little more popular than Ross?
Appears to be, yep.
Yeah, they liked him better. Why is
I have
that?
comments about that.
Go ahead.
Go ahead.
Because I have correspondence. Nobody really liked the colonel.
Worcester, you're saying?
I have a
No, Ross.
Ross.
or Worcester. Ross was regular Army. Worcester was volunteer service.
Okay.
And I have a thing during the early winter of '63. Friend Smith,
Yes, from Derby.
Connecticut, writes home to his wife, "I'm chopping wood again for the Colonel. I'd rather be chopping wood for you." Isn't that sweet?
Well, he just missed his wife. That doesn't mean he doesn't like the Colonel.
No, he didn't have a lot of nice things to say about Colonel. But that's not unusual in the scheme of things.
Okay.
That's not unusual.
Always complain.
Of course.
That's right.
Nobody
That's
likes
right.
the boss.
No, exactly right. But then later, when it's a backward glance and you're like, you know what, he wasn't so bad after all. Like, I did not like my principal in elementary school. She was a nun. I was always in her office for making fun of someone or something like that, you know. And but looking back, I think she was a great influence on me, you know, because I learned how to make fun of people without getting caught. And so I learned a lot from her. No, really. She was a great influence on me because even though it took 8 years for it to take, you know, eventually the lesson was learned. And now looking back, I'm like, yeah, you know what? She was a bigger influence on me. I hated her.
Yeah.
But I hated her because she was right.
But
I think Worcester was well regarded, particularly by his superiors. Mm-hmm. Later in the war, he's going to leave the 20th Connecticut. He'll go back home and get promoted to full colonel, full bird, and he'll be assigned as colonel of the 29th Connecticut Colored Troops.
Oh, interesting.
Pretty significant.
Okay.
Storied regiment.
Yeah.
If they made glory about the 29th Connecticut, everybody would remember the 29th and not
Really?
the 54th
Really?
Massachusetts. Yes.
Okay, I've never heard of him.
Yep, of course not.
Yeah. Because they didn't make a movie about
The
him.
54th
That's right.
Massachusetts, the 55th Massachusetts, and the 29th Connecticut are the only three regiments of colored troops that retained their state designation.
Yep.
All the other black troops that were recruited were referred to as United States Colored
Yeah.
Troops.
Right, okay. And why is that? Why was it that they retained him but the other ones didn't?
I think part of it was their service, their gallant service.
Got it.
Although what always puzzled us is, speaking about William Burr Worcester, is that he's one of the few colonels with tremendous combat experience and record who doesn't obtain a brevet
Right.
after the war.
Well,
Most colonels
not
would
brevet
become
general. A brevet general. He did not get brevet
Right,
general.
correct.
He did get a brevet colonelcy.
Right.
Retroactive to Chancellorsville.
Right, but after being colonel of the gallant 29th, he is one of the few that's not breveted after the war with a general's rank. And we always speculate, was that because he led colored troops?
Oh.
Now, Colonel Noble of the 17th, whom I know a lot about.
Yes.
He becomes the highest ranking prisoner in Andersonville because he's captured on New Year's Eve, on Christmas Eve, 1864. He's bouncing around in a carriage coming home from court-martial duty. He doesn't even have a patrol with him. He's just bobbling around like he's out for a ride. And he gets scooped up and becomes the highest-ranking prisoner in Andersonville. And not a pretty dubious distinction. He obtains he is granted a brevet generalship after his service in the war. So
I think what we're talking about is politics here.
Right, we are. And we wonder, we've discussed this, is it because Worcester led a black regiment that he was never breveted? We don't know that for sure, but we speculate.
That kind of sucks if that was
be
true, because here you are, a white officer, you're doing your duty for your country, for your service,
taking a big risk.
and you're taking a big risk. You know, like on the battlefield, you're taking a big risk if you're captured, right? And then here, your own government that asked you to do this is now not advancing you because of that. I mean, it could be, I don't know, but that would really stink if that was
Connecticut politics. We really we speculate on that all the time.
Yep.
Yeah. Okay. All right. So keep going. Tell us more.
Well,
after they join the 12th Corps, of course, they're going to be in the Battle of Chancellorsville. They're at the apex of the attack on the third morning of the battle when General Lee orders an assault all along the line. And I think that their position was near Hazel Grove. And so they're going to be forced back. Their first adversary would be the 10th Virginia Regiment. And the 20th would fall back to a little shelf halfway up a hill behind them. And at that point, Worcester's horse is shot out from under him, but he quickly regains another horse and continues to lead his men. And meanwhile, the 10th Virginia is replaced by the 16th Mississippi Regiment. The push continues up to the top of the hill, up to, what was it called, Fairlawn, I believe. And at that point, Worcester's horse is shot out again. This time he head over heels. He knocks the wind out of him. He's almost unconscious. He's trying to regroup himself and get his wits about him. And just as he stands up, a Mississippi officer points a sword at his chest. And at that point, he's got to surrender. So he and 4 other officers and a little over 100 men.
102 men, are captured.
And
This is at Chancellorsville.
Yes.
This is Chancellorsville.
Okay. But
And of course, the fight is going to move on past them, so they're left in the wake of the battle. And things quiet down. Before they're marched away, Worcester gains, I guess, the confidence of one of the officers enough to let him go under guard across the battlefield where they fought, so that Worcester can talk to some of the wounded, take personal effects from some of the dead of the regiment, and eventually get that stuff home to the families.
Wow.
And then he's marched off to
Libby,
to Richmond, and Worcester winds up in Libby prison for a couple of weeks.
Yeah, okay.
The enlisted men are going to be put in a boat, taken out to the Belle Island in the middle of the James. And as they say, he's exchanged within a couple of weeks, so he returns to the regiment in time to lead them to Gettysburg.
Right.
Do you know who he's exchanged for, or no? So he's just exchanged.
Just his muster records indicate that he's away at prison for a while.
Let's talk about. We said we were going to talk a little about Chancellorsville. Just a note about Chancellorsville, where we're from in the Valley. Chancellorsville is the worst day for families back home in the Valley because of the casualty rate, the prisoner rate, and so it's devastating back home. It's also devastating for many of the regiments who participate in the battle, and I think Chancellorsville, that defeat literally sears the Army of the Potomac, and I don't think the 20th is any different. We often think of Chancellorsville defeat as, we talk about the 11th Corps and Howard's Cowards and the Flying Dutchman and how that affects them coming into Gettysburg. But I think that Chancellorsville has a marked effect on many of the regiments that are seared by it, including the 20th. Again, it's the worst day back home for their families. Chancellorsville just devastates many families in our area. Many of these men.
Which company it was that came out of Seymour? Because they took a big hit.
H, I believe.
H, yeah.
The colonel is wounded. Worcester is captured along with many of his men, and they are released in time for Gettysburg. The Lieutenant Colonel Worcester is going to lead the regiment because Ross was badly wounded, and that's how they start the march toward Gettysburg with this great, I don't know, turbulence behind them.
Yeah.
Very searing, as I say, a very searing experience as their first combat.
Well, I was reading up on them briefly, and they talked about Chancellorsville and that they're in the 12th Corps, but it's described it as they were part of the 12th Corps, which received the brunt of Stonewall Jackson's. And you forget that the 11th Corps wasn't the only corps involved in that. Right. It was rolled up. And so, there's this other troops, and they got it just as bad. But for some reason, the 11th Corps gets the...
they're the scapegoats.
They're the scapegoats, exactly.
Definitely the scapegoats.
All right. So then they're on their way to Gettysburg. They've got Chancellorsville behind them.
Yeah. Just as a little side.
Go ahead.
A number of years ago, when I first began researching Worcester, discovered that his widow had given a lot of his stuff to the State Museum up in Hartford. So I went up and met the curator one day, and he was thrilled because nobody looks at this stuff. It turns out that when the regiment was mustered in, Worcester was given a presentation sword by his biggest client, which was known as Wallace & Sons Copper and Brass Manufacturing. And then he loses that, of course, at Chancellorsville. And the people back home learn about it, so they round up some money and buy him another sword.
Oh, nice.
he comes out of Libby. The first thing he does, not knowing about the second sword, he buys himself another sword. So now there's 3 of them. And ultimately, later in the war, when he takes over the 29th Connecticut, he gets a 4th sword. And the curator pulled it all out for me.
That's so cool.
So, yeah, it was cool. It was cool.
The swords are interesting because by that point, they're really not practical, right? They're more...
Keeping the guys moving, whack them on the backside, keep moving forward.
Right, but like you're not getting in many sword fights once you're in battle, right?
No,
So they're becoming
it's
more and more
George
ceremonial.
Custer charging across the field. Follow me, you Wolverine.
Right. Now that makes sense. On horseback charging across the field, then you could still use one. But for an infantry officer, but they're fascinating though. And it looks so cool just seeing someone walking around with a sword.
Oh, yeah.
I don't know.
It does.
It's just a cool thing. All right, so go ahead.
So we're going to start talking about Gettysburg, but I just have a quote here that I guess it's a Connecticut quote. After Chancellorsville, I'm really stuck on Chancellorsville because I think it sets the stage for a lot of what these guys feel, whether they feel humiliated or angry or Sanford Chafee, who's a captain of the 20th Connecticut, overhears one private in his company sum up the common attitude of the 20th Connecticut after Chancellorsville. It was only the officers got licked. We wasn't. So these guys really understand the fact or believe the fact that they're good soldiers. I think they're determined to do something about Chancellorsville on the way to Gettysburg, like, the whole we're never going to run again. But I think they understand for the most part that they're really good soldiers. They try their best. They're patriots, but they're badly led. And I think some of that is going to shine through in on the way to Gettysburg. So that quote, I've always liked that quote after Chancellorsville.
So we know that by June 27, the Army of the Potomac is at Frederick, Maryland.
Right.
And the command changes to George Meade. He issues orders to his corps commanders to spread out across central Maryland, but keep working northward. We got to find those people. And by the 30th, the 20th Connecticut is now at Littlestown, south of here, about 12 miles. And on the morning of the 1st, we know the fight begins on the west side of Gettysburg, and word reaches General Meade that he's got to consolidate his forces at this point. So the 12th Corps gets orders to move up the Baltimore Pike. And by mid-afternoon of the 1st, they are at the village of Two Taverns. Now, up until that time, the men on the march are bantering and having a good old time with their little walk. But after the village of Two Taverns, they can now hear the noise, the thumping of the cannon up here. And one man later remarked that there was a somber look about the men as they moved north.
They knew what was going on.
Yes.
Yeah. They'd heard that sound before. All right. So then they get up here. Now they're in the 12th Corps. So they're on their way. They're hearing the first day's battle going on, but they're not brought up in time.
They will reach Gettysburg in the evening, pretty much after the fighting is over.
So about what time are they at Two Taverns?
Mid-afternoon. Taking a break.
So the fight is still not decided yet on the first day.
Correct.
Okay, go ahead.
So the head of the column will reach the Cemetery Hill after dark. And, of course, to go any farther means they're walking right into the Confederates below the town.
Right.
So at that point, I think the head of the column is turned around. You went too far forward. You got to back up a little bit. So they'll come back down the back side of the hill, and then they're ordered to move off to the right. Now, all that land out there back then was cornfield. So they're going to move through.
Where are you talking? Like
on the east side of the Baltimore Pike.
Gotcha. So behind Culp's Hill.
Yeah. Well, kind of even with it. So they're going to move to the right through the cornfield.
So where the museum is now would have been cornfield.
Roughly, yes.
Okay.
So they're going to move off to the right through that area.
Okay.
And then they will be placed on, of course, Culp's Hill is 2 hills. Mm-hmm. The left end of the line is at the crest of the bigger hill touching the 7th Indiana.
Which is actually Culp's Hill.
Which is actually Culp's Hill. So that's the right end of the 1st Corps at that point.
Right.
And then their line will stretch down the backside of Culp's Hill through a swale and then up over the top of the smaller of the 2 hills and then down again to the valley toward Rock Creek.
Okay.
So they're going to take up that position after dark.
How many men do they have?
Let's see. I think it was just about 10,000. Do you have the number there?
I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I meant the 20th.
Oh, the 20th?
Yeah.
A little over 300 men.
Okay, 3. So about average.
Yes, average size.
Now, did they start off with the full 1,000 at the beginning of their service?
Yes, they did.
So is most of that attrition to disease, or did they take a lot of casualties at Chancellorsville, or both? Or
it's a little of both, but I think it's mostly sickness.
Yeah.
I think by 63, by Gettysburg, a lot of regiments are showing the same similar numbers, and it is attrition, and it's disease, and it's sickness, and it's all that wrapped up in one. And I think I think a lot of these regiments are pretty similar in nature regarding that. I mean, some regiments are really deficient in numbers, and others are a little stronger. But I would say it's an average regiment with regard to numbers and attrition.
Okay. All right. So now they get up here July 1st, don't take part in any of the fighting.
Correct.
They're positioned with the 12th Corps. What is that? By the morning of the...
by the morning of the 2nd.
They are ordered over there.
They are in place. And all day long on the 2nd, George Meade has been looking to the right, fearing that the attack would come from that direction. But, of course, we know later in the day, Sickles moves out of position. The 3rd Corps is too far forward. And now Meade has to call for reinforcements.
Yeah.
And since it had been quiet over on Culp's Hill all day long, he's going to order most of the men off of that hill to move to the left.
Initially, though, doesn't he order all of them?
He does, but 1,500 remain behind for some reason.
Yeah.
Fortunately.
Yeah. I think, I can't remember if it was Green or Geary or someone who kind of, argued the point. No, you should leave someone here. And then finally he relented and said, "Finally, leave a brigade," or something. If I'm remembering it
Green's
correctly,
brigade that remains.
Yeah,
Geary's people. They're the ones who marched right off the battlefield.
They went down to the outlets to go shopping.
All got lost.
Yeah, they wanted to go shopping at the outlets.
Here, let's bring this up. Why didn't George Green get the Medal of Honor?
I don't know. George Green.
I think we should start a
politics
movement.
again. Politics
we should
again.
start a
if
movement.
Alonzo Cushing could get it 10 years ago, why can't George
right.
Green?
That's
I
right.
agree.
Yes.
Let's start the movement.
You know
I
what?
think so.
And Chamberlain got it too.
Yeah, of course.
Why not?
Well, I think George Green deserved the Medal of Honor, and I think it probably was politics.
He definitely deserves more recognition
Good old
here
soldier. Yes.
when you're going around here.
Absolutely.
Now, do you find...
that was my final exam question when I was preparing to become a guide.
What?
We got out to the peach orchard, and my guide supervisor was a fellow, late supervisor.
Clyde Bell?
Clyde Bell.
He was a great guy.
And the guide in my ride was Sue Boardman.
Yep.
So we get out to the peach orchard, and they throw this question at me about Chamberlain up on Little Round Top and defending the left end of the army and what a hero he was, all that kind of stuff. And I said, not for nothing, but there's this fellow Green over on Culp's Hill doing the same thing.
Yeah.
Why don't we recognize him? And at that point, Bell said, "You're done with your tour." I bet. It's the only tour I never had to finish.
Do you find now that
137th New York? I mean, there's your other.
Yeah, they're the
anchor
Chamberlain of the right.
That's
Ireland
right.
is the Chamberlain of the right.
David Ireland.
Do you find now that Little Round Top is closed? Do you take people to Culp's Hill more?
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
And I'm doing carriage rides out there too.
Oh, good. And so, what are the visitors' reactions to Culp's Hill? Because I'm sure people who've even been here probably don't know as much about it because they always focus on Little Round Top and Pickett's Charge, right?
It's true. So it's an all new experience for some of these folks. But it gives me a chance to talk about Corps badges because you've got two different corps up there.
Yep.
It gives me a chance to talk about how George Meade is using to his advantage the arrival of the 6th Army Corps and filling in weak spots on his entire battle line. He effectively has a new army by the morning of July 3.
Why do you say that?
Well, because he's got 16,000 new weapons.
Oh, because of the 6th Corps.
He's replaced,
Gotcha,
he has replaced his casualties.
Yeah. No, right. That's a great point. Yeah.
Can I say something unpopular about the whole Culp's Hill Little Round Top thing?
Yeah.
I think when you take visitors up there, they still don't get it. Because as much clearing as they did, I think people are really having a hard time visualizing. I mean,
I agree.
Little Round Top is like, no matter what you do up there, you're always going to have that view.
You're absolutely
despite
right.
the movement, etc. But if you go up there a year after all the clearing, I think people are still pretty confused about how important that hill was. Like, it's the first part of the battlefield that people go back to. They're obsessed with it, you know, after the battle. It's so well known, and it's really dissipated from popular memory in our time. And I think part of that is the lack of view sheds, the inability to understand.
Totally agree.
And you know what? Why don't they get goats?
I've been saying that for years.
I know,
I'm a
we've
big
all been
proponent of
saying
goats.
that.
Yes,
Let's get the goats.
Goats or cows or something, but goats will be faster, I think. Yeah, I get the goats and clear it out.
Congressional Cemetery down in Washington.
Yeah,
Why
that's
not
right.
bring it up
That's
here?
It works everywhere.
Yeah.
I agree with you, and I think that people's interest in Little Round Top is not so much what happened there. I think that might be what brings them there.
Yeah.
But once you go there,
the novice
view,
just look,
yes.
and it's like it's just so moving, and
it's
I don't
perfect.
think Culp's Hill has that for the first time Gettysburg visitor. It's really hard to understand, and part of it is the lack of view shed. It's just so. I mean, poor George Green. He's pointing his finger down his line, which is like one of the most important lines, battle lines in the battle. And what's he pointing at? The trees are right up in his face.
You would
It's
think
like
he was telling his men what kind of tree that was.
People don't. But my
That's a
point
sequoia,
is that
boys.
people don't get that, and you probably see that a lot when you bring people up on the carriage, right?
Yeah. No, and I agree. There's nothing to see on Culp's Hill, so you have to imagine things, and most people don't have a good imagination.
It's very hard for them.
Yeah. Well, because you
hard.
can't see anything. There's no visual. What's the word I'm looking at? Like orienting point that you can. There's no orienting point that you can see without going up into the tower.
Yeah.
And who wants to do that? I mean, that's such a climb.
I don't know. When we used to bring kids here, we'd let them run up there a couple of times, wear them all out, and then throw them back on the bus.
Yeah. Well, that's different. Those are kids.
Yeah. High school kids.
I'm not going up there again.
High school kids.
No. All right. So July 2nd occurs. They're not part of Green's brigade, so they're not left behind, right? They're sent down to the left.
Marched to the left.
Okay, and
then keep in mind that on the morning of July 2, the 12th Corps is digging in.
Right.
It's kind of new concept, We're talking about Napoleonic tactics prior to this.
Yeah.
Where men stand in long lines side by side and shoot at each other.
And this is why I think Green deserves more credit, because didn't he lobby Geary to do that?
Yes.
And wasn't Geary kind of like, they're probably not going to keep us here very long. There's no point. And then finally he was
right. He marches off into the woods.
Yeah, we're going to go shopping, George. There's an Eddie Bauer down the street.
One of the things that Green does, of course, when he's got to stretch his men out to cover the space of 2 or 3 brigades instead of 1, he's going to build that traverse across the swale in the middle of the 2 hills, so that the Confederates, who do overrun the lower hill pretty quickly because there's nobody there, he's going to build that traverse so they can't get around behind him.
Right. So they go down to the left to assist Sickles. Do they get involved in the fighting, or are they there too late? Or they're with Geary, so they don't even get there.
No, they do. They get down to the Trossel farm, but not till after dark.
Okay.
And by then the fighting is over. Confederates have pulled back up to the road to reconfigure their lines, consolidate, and so on.
That's
so
like
they
me
don't
when
see any action there. But you do find a couple of 12th Corps monuments near the Trossel house.
That's kind of how I am when somebody needs help moving and they get a bunch of us together and everything. I always just happen to show up after all the heavy stuff has been lifted.
Good timing.
Yeah. I don't know how it works, but somehow it works. I just have a knack for that.
So they're ordered to return. So basically, the 20th Connecticut sees no fighting at all until the morning of the 3rd day.
So I know some 12th Corps units have a second monument down in the Sickles area. Do they? No. Okay, so their only monument is the one up on Lower Culp Hill, or Spangler's Hill, if you want to go that way. Okay, so then the July 3rd, the morning of July 3rd, they come back. I mean, they get back there to Culp's Hill at night.
Well, it's around 4 in the morning. They're up on the Baltimore Pike, and at that point, the 20th Connecticut is ordered to move to the right, to get down as close as they can to where the Confederates have overrun the Spangler Spring area.
Okay.
And they'll go out across a cornfield that's across the street from the farm that was used for their field hospital. And 10 years ago, at the 150th anniversary, I decided to see if I could trace their route. So I parked my car over by that house, and I walked across the field, and I put on my Federal Blue.
Nice.
Walked out across this field, and out in the brush, I found a very low stone wall that's just above the marshy area of Spangler Spring. So I figured, okay, that's... When you look at the maps, it kind of looks like that's where they planted their flag.
Okay.
And then their job was to call in the artillery over their heads. And in front of them, their old adversary, the 10th Virginia.
Oh, yes.
So that's what they were doing, calling in artillery.
Right.
We think it's the first time infantry was used as forward artillery.
I was just going to say, so that's the credit that they get, at least, right?
Yes.
Because for all indications point to that being the first time they're being used, which has got to be kind of put you in a tricky position. You got to be pretty close to the enemy, right?
Yes.
So
in terms of artillery yardage, you're absolutely
worse.
Right.
If you advance, you come under friendly fire, which is like one of the most infamous incidents.
Well, that's right. So then that actually happens.
We think they were at that wall when a couple of the artillery shots coming off of Powers Hill fell a little short among the men, and therein is where
George Warner comes into. Well, we have a whole thing on George Warner. He's one of our community fellows, and we know relatives and
still alive, huh?
Oh yeah, he's still there. Yeah,
at least in our minds.
He is. Yeah, come on. He's pretty immediate for us.
Right.
He's. You want to talk about him now?
Well, yeah. So go ahead.
Well, you explain the incident. I'll talk about George.
Well, they're on the wall calling in the artillery, and apparently a couple of shells fell a little short among the 20th Connecticut, and one of those shots blew an arm off of George, and so mangled the other arm that he had to have that one amputated later on. In fact, he was on the operating table when I guess Worcester came to see him, and Surgeon Terry was about to work on him, and George said to the colonel, I knew they got my left arm. I didn't realize they got my right one, too.
Yeah.
Okay, wait, did he have any other wounds, or did the shell just explode? He
had some shrapnel wounds. I have a description of them, but there were other wounds that he had suffered. You don't blow off an arm and not receive,
that's what I'm saying. That's like a perfect split on the shrapnel there, where it misses his torso and just gets his arms.
He was a pretty remarkable fellow.
Yeah, tell us about him.
Not the only famous double amputee in the war. You had, you had guys like Plunkett, Sergeant Plunkett, 21st Massachusetts, Medal of Honor winner at Fredericksburg. Clara Barton saves his life, very well-known veteran. You had the man that George Warner is often mistaken.
I saw that picture, yeah.
For, and his name is Sergeant Alfred Stratton, Company G 147th. He loses both arms at Petersburg. He's 18 years old. But George Warner is probably the most famous, the one people know. I think partly because it's friendly fire that removes his arms. It's a friendly fire incident, which is terribly shocking under the circumstances. Sure. And he lives a very, very long life. He lives to be 91 years old. He's embedded in our community. He has 8 children, 5 before he enlists and 3 afterwards. He is a man that can do nothing for himself. Right. Someone has to do everything for him.
Except one thing.
Yes. But you know what, Sue Boardman, here, I'm going to talk about Sue Boardman.
So for the people that don't know what I'm hinting at, he goes on to have, 6 more kids? Or 3 more kids?
Yeah, so he
already has 8.
So you know what, Sue Boardman, every time she talks about his wife, Sue Boardman, I've heard Sue Boardman make the comment, now that's what I call cooperation. and that's
what I call a real man.
These amputees, they are they're devastated financially and physically. And George does what many others do. He sells pictures of himself to support himself. Obviously,
like an OnlyFans.
Right. So he sells many pictures of himself, and the one that I like the best is probably the one where he and his wife are surrounded by their
kids.
Their children, and Mrs. Warner is holding
Got the cannonball
and the very famous, very prominent photographer Peck in New Haven, Connecticut, printed many of these, and they're very collectible today. And there you see George.
That's not the cannonball. That's a baby.
No, look.
Oh, in her hand. Okay. Next to the baby.
Now, obviously, he wasn't wounded by a solid shot.
Right. It's just symbolic.
It's very symbolic. They're very popular. George is a very interesting guy. He really makes a good life for himself after the war. He's very well known, very well regarded. We still know his family members. His great nephew looks almost exactly like him, and often grows his facial hair to resemble great uncle George.
How many kids does he have?
He has no children. And he's a living historian. He's a reenactor, and a lot of times when he gets into his George Warner mood, his wife Nancy says, "Knock it off, or I'm going to cut off both your arms and beat you with them." But George is a remarkable guy. He never loses his joie
de vivre.
Joie de vivre. He never loses that. He's very popular in town. He tries to work. His wife will often get him all dressed up for the day and stick
the right number
of change to ride the trolley or the train
into New Haven.
What a good wife.
He sold books. He loved to play cards. His son was a carpenter who constructed this little box for him to be able to play pinochle with. But he has
How would he do that?
He would point at he would have one of his sons with him, and he would point the cards to be played with his stump.
Got it.
And one of the boys would play the cards for him. He's buried in Evergreen Cemetery, and is going to in New Haven. He's going to unveil the 20th Connecticut monument here.
He did that. We have the picture of that
and
too.
And the great monument on
East Rock,
where all of the great East Rock and New Haven, where all of the great celebrities of the post-war period, Sherman, I don't think Grant comes, Sherman, Sheridan, all the great generals of the Civil War converge for the unveiling of this monument in New Haven. And George is the one that pulls the string for the drape of the monument with his teeth. Here at Gettysburg, he's hooked up with a harness.
Right, and ran a pulley system up and over.
And he backs up. He's sitting on what we call Warner Rock, and he backs up. But George is an endearing character, a well-known character, a well-regarded veteran in our area for many, many years. And many people who know the family still regard him with a lot of affection and today. We're certainly George Warner fans.
Absolutely.
Oh yeah, and this story I've heard so many times over the years. Everybody loves this story.
Yep. I just want to talk about. I'm here for the local color. I keep saying Jim's here for the main.
Jim's the guy.
Event. Yeah. Jim's the man, and I'm just the local color. The surgeon that operates on George. Terry is the brother of General Terry. Fort
Alfred
Fisher
Terry?
fame. Yeah, Fort Fisher fame. It's very close-knit New Haven family. And
later,
of
Little
course,
Bighorn fame.
Little Bighorn,
Yep.
yes. And I guess the moral of this is, and we could go into that story, but it's a tangent off this, is that in our community, we're still a even though we're an old mill town, brownfields, surrounded by what used to be a lot of dairy farms. We're still a pretty close knit community. And Old Shelton, Old Derby, Old Seymour, we still have a lot of ties to the past that are really all around us. And so, a lot of these families are intertwined and well remembered in our community, as George certainly is.
So he loses his arms. Worcester gets pissed.
Yeah, he's a little upset.
What does he do?
He sends a note back to the gunners behind him on Powers Hill and told them in no uncertain terms that if they did not correct their aim, he would about face his men, march up there and shoot them.
There's something I found this morning. I don't know if this is true. Tell me if it is. The courier who carried the message added the comment, "He'd do it too, so be careful." Is that true?
I believe it is.
That's pretty good. Is that little Lieutenant Muhlenberg who gets the warning? Is that who it is up on Powers Hill?
It might be.
Yeah, because he's in charge of
There's like 3 different batteries up there.
Right.
Yeah.
I think he's in charge of the brigade up there, right? The artillery brigade, if I'm not mistaken. Okay, so continue then. So he and then they do adjust, right?
Yes, they do.
But no,
adjust.
let's give them a little benefit of the doubt here. This is the first time they're using infantry as spotters.
Exactly.
Right? So, I mean, they're not quite...
And again, aren't they on the flank?
Who?
The 20th? Aren't they on the end of the line and forward?
Well, they were ordered forward. They're the ones who go down to the stone wall.
Right. So
now, where's the stone wall exactly that you're talking about?
Oh,
so you would...
You have to go looking.
But it's in the woods.
No. There's an open field across the street from the house that was used as the field hospital. And I think there's a small parking area right there. So we're right on the Baltimore Pike. But you can go in there. It's rough today, but it's still low shrubs.
All right, I'm coming out of the visitor center at the light.
To the left.
I'm going to make a left.
Yes.
And there's a parking lot, you say. Oh, you're talking about
the Powers Hill parking lot. Is that the one you're talking about?
No, that's down to the right. So if I'm coming out of the visitor center, I'm going to make a left. And then how far after I've made that left do I go?
It's a few hundred yards.
Okay.
There's a stone house over on the left. The barn is long gone. I think there's a couple of smaller outbuildings behind the house today. But across the street, it's rough. I mean, back 10 years ago, you clearly have a graveled area, but it's kind of grown in. And then it's weeds and such across what used to be a cornfield.
Huh.
And there's a couple of houses just beyond it, so you're basically walking in behind those houses and then, then moving north.
So if I'm not wanting to go on people's property and find this, I'd need to go on, Williams? Or?
Well, the other way not Williams, that's too far up.
Okay.
But the other way to do it would be to go in where the guardrail is. There's a metal guardrail. I call it the back door entrance to Culp's Hill.
Colgrove.
So you go in there, and you can park just before you have to take the right turn to go to the 13th New Jersey. But you can park there and climb over the stone wall, and you're going to be within a few yards of the wall that I
see.
found.
Out in that field.
Yes.
Okay. Gotcha. Okay. Gotcha. I'm there now. So that's actually, though, but if I'm coming out of the visitor center, that would be a right-hand turn that I would make. Because if I'm going to Culgrove.
Baltimore.
But I couldn't get to Culgrove from...
Let me see. You're right, because I'm coming off of the Granite Schoolhouse Road, so you're right.
There you go.
A right turn down the hill a little.
Yeah, okay.
And then in.
So it's a left on Baltimore if you're coming out of Granite Schoolhouse, and then there's the Mulligan McDuffers parking lot. Is that the gravel lot you're talking about?
No, it's farther up.
Oh, okay. All right. So forget the gravel lot, ladies and gentlemen, if you're looking for this. Just go on Culgrove, and then pull off before you make a right onto... around
the 13th New Jersey.
Does that change to Carmen there?
Yes,
or
it does.
It does, okay. And then, so you pull off there, climb over the stone wall, go out in the field, and good luck.
And watch for ticks.
Yeah, exactly. Make sure you have your off. All right, so that's where they are. And that makes sense because then Powers Hill is behind that.
Yes.
And they're firing over.
Yes.
The Confederates, you mentioned the 10th Virginia is Walker's brigade.
They're up above Party Field.
Right, okay. And then some of them are down across from where the Indiana Monument is today, right? So this is the area we're talking about.
Yes.
Okay, gotcha. Okay. All right, so then continue that.
So after that, the other regiments that are still lined up on the Baltimore Pike are going to be ordered to move to the right to make the attack as well. So they're going to sweep across those cornfields, and then they're going to have to get through the marshy ground by Spangler Spring to attack the Confederates above them.
Gotcha. Okay. And they do attack the Confederates above them. And how does that go?
It's a slog.
Yeah.
I mean, we're talking about a fight here on the third morning that, as far as I've been able to determine, is the longest sustained fighting of the entire battle. It's 8 hours of shooting out there.
That's what everybody says. It's between that and the second, you're talking almost 12 hours of fighting over this hill.
Yes.
And no other part of the battlefield has that many hours fought over it.
No,
Yet
they don't.
all of these other ones, sustained fighting. All of these other ones get so much attention.
They do.
And Culp's Hill, it's like, that's why it's so fascinating to me that it's just forgotten.
After the battle is over, the Provost Guard puts up a sign downtown that said they'd pay 10 cents a pound for lead bullets. One man wrote when he was an adult that he was about 12 years old at the time. He said, my buddies and I all knew where the worst fighting was. We just picked up our milk pails and went out to the Union line on Culp Hill. We stood there and turned in a circle, and in 10 minutes we filled our buckets.
Yeah, wow. 13 cents. 13 cents a pound for lead.
13 cents a pound.
And these kids are going out there because, I mean, the town is devastated economically. You have to do something for yourself.
Yeah.
But after the battle, it's notable that, that becomes the place where everybody goes to see the battle-damaged trees with lead poison. It's a big tourist attraction after the battle.
Yeah, right.
The fact that Spangler Spring is there, which was a picnic area for the townspeople, and there were farm lanes that went down through the corn to get there, so it's easy access.
Yeah. Do you know this is off topic, but you mentioned that people used to go picnic there at Spangler Spring, and there's farm lanes and stuff that go down there. The park roads that go around that area today, are those built on old farm lanes, or do you know? Not everybody knows about roads.
The
it's okay
roads,
if you don't.
Anything designated as a road, I believe, was there during the battle. Anything it's called an avenue
was added.
Is added, and basically the avenues were added for first horse and carriage traffic, and then ultimately for automobile traffic, and become the main routes to tour the battlefield.
But as I understand it, though, there are some avenues that, in part at least, are built over old. Like Hancock, Wainwright is a good one.
They're not exact. Like I know Wainwright is not exactly in the old roadbed.
Correct.
But yes, that's absolutely true. They do follow the old roads.
Yeah.
Some of them, not all of them.
I'm fascinated by the old roads in the park. I don't know why. Like Webb and Harrow.
But the old maps are fascinating to.
Oh yeah, I know. And just little things, just the changes they made in the roads, like Stone Avenue. Where it used to be more of you just go straight along the fence line there, and then you make a right angle turn into the woods, and then another right angle turn to go around to the 24th Michigan and 19th Indiana and all that. And then, but as they went from horse and buggies to vehicles that were, going a little faster, they had to soften the curve.
Right.
And then to do that, they had to move the road, soften the curve, and then move the monuments.
But some of the roads disappeared because they were originally designed for small cars.
Yeah.
And of course, get to the 50s and they're big cars.
Oh, yeah. And they move faster, so they can't, it's not that they can't do these right angle turns, but it's more difficult to do. I'm just fascinated by that. Okay, that's not about the 20th Connecticut, though. All right, so it's a slog, you say. They're going back and forth. A slog, and the amount of time that it took for the Union to finally recapture Culp's Hill tells me that it wasn't just as simple as attacking and the Confederates ran. Right. So give us an idea of the play-by-play.
Well, the other regiments, part of the brigade, are going to move across the field right behind the 20th, and then they're going to try to fight their way through the Spangler Spring Marsh. And of course, 10th Virginia is above them. It's an elevation, so it's they got to push them out of there, get them off of the stone wall that runs across the top of the hill and over the hill, and the stone wall runs across Confederate Avenue today, down by the Indiana State Monument, down to Rock Creek. So it's going to be a serious effort just for that area. And in the meantime, of course, the other regiments that have been called away are now trying to overrun the upper part of Culp Hill. Mm-hmm. And in that group will also be members of the 6th Army Corps. And that's one of the areas that really fascinates me about that hill, because you're looking at monuments from the 6th Corps as well as the 12th Corps.
Yeah.
And you see them on both sides of the road up there, which tells us the breastworks are on the right. Right over the breastworks, the hill literally drops away. Over a chute. And as fast as these regiments are running out of bullets, they're swapping out.
And that's the thing that I love about that too, is it's a great illustration of how they would double up the lines. And then you could explain to people with these visuals, these guys run out, they go back, the guys behind them go up, and you've got this constant rate of fire.
And so the ones that are falling back. There's a declivity, if you will, behind that part of the hill.
A ravine,
and it's relatively flat, slight incline, but that, I believe, is where the ammunition wagons came in.
Yeah, that's what I was told.
So the men could fall back there. They could clean their weapons. They could drink from their canteen. They could get more ammunition, relax a little bit, and then back into the fight they go.
Yeah.
It's nonstop shooting out there for all those hours.
Yeah, that's I can't imagine that. I mean, and that, being with the fact that that it's in the woods, I would imagine is making it even harder for the smoke to clear. So
absolutely,
you got to be choking on that smoke.
Yeah, they're in full leaf, so they're working like a canopy.
Yes,
and so visibility is an issue.
And we kind of got an idea of that with the Canadian smoke that's been coming down here. Some days it was really thick, and
we call it the fog of battle.
Yeah, it was kind of cool, but not very fun to breathe in.
No,
but so I imagine though, for those guys, like, it just had to be a nightmare. Forget the battle part of it, just the breathing part of it had to be hard, and then you can't see and everything like that. All right, so who are they up against though when they're trying to are they up against the same regiment the whole time, or is it changing?
There are several different brigades that have come across Rock Creek. Some are Virginians, some are Georgians, some are North Carolina.
So they're just
everybody.
And what finally gives? How do they finally recapture their old spot?
Confederates have been overwhelmed.
Yeah.
Keep in mind that the Union advantage up there on that hill is that they can fall back 50 yards behind them and regroup and get more ammunition. The Confederates have come across the stream with whatever they can carry, and there's no way for their ammunition supplies to get to them readily.
Right.
So ultimately, the Confederates are overwhelmed and pushed back.
So I'm thinking of those six corps monuments higher up on the hill, but there, to my recollection, there's not a second line of monuments on the lower part of Culp's Hill or Spangler's Hill, right?
That's
so.
Correct.
Do they have other 12th Corps units that are behind them, or is that it?
That's it.
That's it. So there's one line of troops, basically, and then whatever reserves the regimental commander.
That's the position of the 20th Connecticut, the 5th Connecticut, the 107th New York, and 1st Potomac Home Brigade, all the way up the hill.
Yeah.
123rd New York. One of my favorite monuments is that particular monument. That's the Muse Cleo. Recording history on our tablet. I really love that one.
Let me tell you a fortune, man, Miss Cleo.
Cleo.
So, okay, so then they recapture and
so it quiets
wrap
down
up the battle for them.
Noontime. It's quieting down now. And now, well, of course, the night before, Meade has this council with his senior commanders about what's going to happen on day 3. Should we leave? Should we attack? Should we wait for Lee to come to us? And, of course, everybody says, let's stay put and wait. And that's when he tells Gibbon, get ready. They're coming right up the middle. So he knows that something's going to happen. Also, there was a new organization in the Army of the Potomac started about 4 months earlier known as the Bureau of Military Intelligence.
Right.
Like half a dozen guys in the command.
Information.
Yeah. And by that evening of July 2, they have interviewed all of the Confederate prisoners, and they know at that point that the only ones they've not yet seen are George Pickett's 6,000 Virginians.
Right.
So they know they're coming.
Yeah.
So Meade at that point apparently is going to issue orders to send at least a brigade from the 12th Corps over to the center of the line, and they will stack up in reserve in the field across the street from the Leicester House, Meade's headquarters.
Got the 20th Corps.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well. The 20th Regiment is part of the brigade that is sent over there.
Right. And then...
And by the way, the 14th Connecticut historian, when he does his regimental history, he refers to that. He said, we know our comrades are right behind us.
And then, but they don't they're never called up to participate in Pickett's charge.
They're not.
But they're there in case they're needed.
Just in case.
Yeah, those Confederates, man, they didn't stand a chance. I mean, there was like layers of Union troops on the other side of that ridge.
There were.
Yeah. And you don't really hear
And
that
it's
too
not
much.
just them back there, but all of the regiments along the line down past the U.S. Regulars Monument. They could see where the Virginians are going. They're running right across their face.
Yeah.
So they're all going to turn and move to the right as well.
Yes, right. They're just going to swallow them whole. Yeah. What a waste. Okay, so that brings us to the end of the story of the 20th Connecticut here at Gettysburg.
Here, yes.
And, of course, they have more of a story. Just real quickly, though, where do they go after? What happens?
Well,
you want to do it or shall I?
Well, no, you go ahead.
All right. So they are, of course, with the Army of the Potomac through into the fall. And after the Battle of Chickamauga and Chattanooga gets bottled up, the 11th Corps and the 12th Corps will be detached from the Army of the Potomac and sent south. And when they get south, they will be reorganized as the 20th Corps. They will participate in what they call the Battle Above the Clouds or the Battle of Lookout Mountain. The 20th Connecticut itself will be in the rear guarding the trains, the supplies. So they don't participate in the action. But the 20th Corps and the 5th Corps, I'm sorry, not the 20th Corps, the 20th Connecticut Regiment and the 5th Connecticut Regiment both have a monument up on a place called Orchard Knob outside of Chattanooga. After that battle to secure Chattanooga, we get into the winter of 64, and at that point, Worcester is called home to get promoted and take his new command. So the regiment then remains under the control of Philo Buckingham for the rest of the war.
And we have to talk about him a little more.
Go ahead.
Well, I just want to say, just if you ever get a hold of a 20th Connecticut regimental history or 20th Connecticut Veterans Ladder Badge, they are transferred west. They go with Uncle Billy. They become part of Uncle Billy's webbed feet. They march with him right up, march to the sea and up the coast. And I can just show you this, Matt. That's their Veterans Ladder Badge with all of their engagements, and you can take a look at that. It's quite the combat outfit. And you can see that ladder badge is certainly substantial.
So hard to do this.
Yeah, well, you can just read them
There we
off.
are, okay.
I mean,
They're just showing everybody what it looks like.
They end the war. You go ahead, read them.
Go ahead, okay.
They're going to end the war at Bentonville.
Well, you just ruined the ending now,
Oh,
Carolyn.
darn
I'm in the middle of reading that book.
Well, you don't need to finish it. She just told you.
Oh, yeah.
Buckingham is quoted extensively in that book.
Yes. Well,
So
we'll talk about
here's what we got. Chancellorsville, Gettysburg, Tracy City, Boyd's Trail, Resaca.
Yep.
Never heard of that one. Cassville,
Yep.
Peachtree Creek, Turner's Ferry, Atlanta, Savannah. Those are some big ones. Charleston, Silver Run, Averysboro, and Bentonville.
Yep.
And then there's
So
the
I've got a
20th
little
Corps.
story for you about Peachtree Creek.
All right.
A number of years ago, when I still had my practice up in Connecticut, 3 young ladies came to the office one day. Somebody had told them, go see Jim because he's the guy down in Gettysburg. And they said, we are doing a program called Who Do You Think You Are?
Oh, I got the same
Remember
call,
that?
but we'll talk about
Yeah,
that.
yeah.
That's that PBS show?
Yep.
Yeah. Okay.
And they were researching ancestors of modern people, famous people. And so they couldn't tell me anything. All that they knew, they were looking into Derby and the monument in Derby and other odds and ends. And they said, we can't tell you who it is unless you sign a piece of paper that says you're,
Jim had to sign an NDA.
keep your mouth shut.
Shades.
Yeah. So I finally caved. They said, okay, I'll sign the paper. Who are you doing?
Right.
They told me they were researching a grandfather of
Matthew Broderick.
Matthew Broderick.
Right.
Oh,
I got
yeah.
the same call up at the high school.
And
Yeah.
he was killed at Peachtree Creek.
Matthew Broderick was?
No, his
Oh,
grandfather.
thank God.
Yeah. No,
Yeah,
he
gotta
got
watch the program.
He
Sorry
got his
about that.
in glory.
Yeah, right,
Yeah,
exactly. So it was Matthew
so-
Broderick's ancestor. So,
Is Martin? It's Robert Martindale. He's
Interesting.
a Derby boy. He was 38 years old when he enlisted as a private in Company B, which was the Derby Company. And yes, he was killed at Peachtree Creek. And we both, guys, as I said, it's we're a big town now. we're like over 50,000, but we still have that very intimate core of old timers. And I got the same call up at Shelton High School. We had just done a program on the 20th Connecticut, a guy named Friend Smith, and
Also from Derby.
Also from Derby, and we'll talk a little about him too. He's going to be terribly wounded in the face at Averisboro. We got the call about that, and his great-great-grandfather is Robert. His name is Robert Martindale. He was a tailor in Derby, and signed up maybe for the bounty. I mean, because his age is 38, he might have signed up for a bounty. Who the hell?
Yeah.
Times were tough.
Well,
Times were tough in Derby.
So he signed up. He wasn't drafted.
No, he enlisted.
Yeah, the draft did not begin until after Gettysburg.
Oh, that's right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, maybe it was a tough time, and he just had to.
I have a little.
38's still pretty young. Well, not back then though.
No,
I mean, you were old back then.
Yeah. This I think it's interesting that I think the glory thing really sparked an interest in like Civil War ancestry and stuff like that.
Yeah.
So I think that's why we got the call.
All right. Well, look, we've got more important business here to take care of, ladies and gentlemen, and that is a commercial break followed by questions from our patrons. If you're watching live, stick around because we're going to continue the show. But during the commercial break, I'm going to talk to you directly. And so why don't we do this? We'll take our commercial break, and we will come back after these words. Attention all aficionados of Union Civil War music, your ensemble awaits. The National Association of Civil War Musicians, founded by the Grand Army of the Republic, serves as a beacon for those who cherish the notes that stirred a nation. Our association is a hub where the scores of the past are preserved and the spirit of camaraderie persists. Immerse yourself in the melodies that played through history. For example, take July 3rd, 1863. As Lee's cannons unleashed a maelstrom, the Philadelphia Brigade Band exemplified valor. Positioned at the heart of the onslaught, their music defied the cacophony of the largest artillery barrage in North American history. Their presence was a deliberate symbol. If the band could stand tall and play, then the infantrymen can lay in wait to hold that crucial ground. Today, we keep this and other memories alive. No matter if you sound the fife, beat the drum, or swell the brass, your contribution breathes life into our mission. Let's commemorate, collaborate, and preserve together. Step forward and join the ranks today. Visit nacwm.org. That's nacwm.org, the National Association of Civil War Musicians, honoring all the brave soldiers who dared to wage a war with only an instrument.
If you're a lover of history, then go to trhistorical.com. There, you'll find apparel, drinkware, decor, and more, featuring a wide range of subjects from the ancient world to the Cold War. Looking to make an impression with the perfect gift? Well, TR Historical now offers a vintage wrapping service for a truly unique presentation. And our listeners will save 15% when using promo code GBERG1863 at checkout. So go to trhistorical.com. TR Historical, for the love of history.
Who can forget the sounds of the 60s?
The 1860s. I can't, and you can't either. Now, there's Marching Through Georgia, the exciting new album by Billy Webster. All of your favorite hits of the 1860s in one place. Such hits as Gary Owens, The Battle Hymn of the Republic, All Quiet Along the Potomac Tonight, Marching Through Georgia, and much, much more. So what are you waiting for? Go to billysongs.com and order your digital download of Billy Webster's Marching Through Georgia today. That's billysongs.com. For the Historian has a wide variety of titles, new and used, of military books from publishers like Osprey, Gettysburg Publishing, Stackpole, Savas Beatty, UNC Press, and more. I make it a point to go there once a week because I have new bookshelves to fill and I never know what treasures I'll find, and neither will you. They even have toy soldiers, model kits, games, children's books, and more. So stop by and check them out on your next visit to Gettysburg, or better yet, order right now online at forthehistorian.com and mention that you heard about them on Addressing Gettysburg in the Note to Seller box, and they will refund you your shipping. And if you call 717-685-5207 or stop by the store on your next visit and mention us, you'll get 20% off retail price. That's forthehistorian.com or 717-685-5207. Seminary Ridge Museum and Education Center, Gettysburg's premier museum, is housed in the historic Lutheran Seminary building constructed in 1832, a witness to the first day of battle. The museum's 3 floors of exhibits connect visitors to the dilemmas that led to the Civil War, provide a powerful and personal view of the battle's first day, and explore one of the battlefield's largest hospitals. No visit to Seminary Ridge Museum and Education Center is complete without a guided tour of the building's famous cupola, where on the eve of battle, officers and civilians saw thousands of Confederate soldiers' campfires burning to the west, and Brigadier General John Buford watched for vital federal reinforcements as fighting erupted on the morning of July 1st. Today, you can stand where Buford stood and discover how this view helped chart the course of the Battle of Gettysburg. Your trip to Gettysburg is not complete without a serious visit to Seminary Ridge Museum and Education Center, Gettysburg's premier museum. Purchase tickets online at seminaryridgemuseum.org or call 717-339-1300. To get tickets or a cupola tour, listeners may call or walk in and mention Addressing Gettysburg, or by ordering online using the promo code AG1863 for 20% off. Seminary Ridge Museum and Education Center. It began here.
There's a devil to pay.
Movies and documentaries about history are spread out across the internet, and their quality is often suspect. History Fix delivers curated historic programming to your preferred device using their website or branded apps. Join History Fix for movies, documentaries, short films, and how-tos. Content covers historic eras ranging from the 1st to the 21st centuries. Their team of curators brings you the most comprehensive and authentic historical content available. Addressing Gettysburg podcast fans receive 20% off their first annual subscription. So what are you waiting for? Sign up at www.historyfix.com and use promo code ADGBURG. That's ADGBURG. Every subscription begins with a 7-day risk-free trial. And after signing up, download the History Fix app on your smartphone. So go to www.historyfix.com and use promo code ADGBURG. That's ADGBURG on an annual subscription. Escape into history with History Fix. Civil War Trails is the world's largest open-air museum, offering over 1,500 sites and stories for you to explore. Each Civil War Trails site has an interpretive sign to help fuel your imagination as you stand on remote mountaintop artillery positions, in fields where thundering cavalry charges took place, or in now quiet downtowns where raids, riots, or raiders shattered the peace. Over 60 Civil War Trail sites allow you to stand in the footsteps of the Gettysburg campaign across Virginia, West Virginia, Maryland, and of course, Pennsylvania. In fact, they are expanding further into Pennsylvania now with the latest sites in Wrightsville, Hanover, and Chambersburg. As you travel the trail, you'll find more than just great history. Beyond battlefields, great barbecue, beer, and bourbon await. Here's a pro tip: carry cash and never book your day completely to ensure that you can take that gravel road, explore that hiking trail, or pick up an amazing artifact from that awesome antique shop you find along the way. Request a free brochure shipped right to your door at civilwartrails.org, and be sure to snap a hashtag sign selfie next time you are out exploring. Click the link to Civil War Trails in our show notes. Follow Civil War Trails and create some history of your own.
You're listening to the Addressing Gettysburg podcast with Matt Kelly.
All right, and we are back now, and it's time to get to the questions from our patrons. Don't forget to become a patron. You have to go to patreon.com/addressinggettysburg, and there you can submit questions in writing at all levels. But if we continue with this video option here, to do that, you're going to have to be the first lieutenant level on Patreon or colonel over on YouTube once those levels are launched. In the meantime, here we go with the old-fashioned way. Ethan Gallo, our buddy, he says, how many commissioned and enlisted personnel were raised in New Haven and Weston?
You want me to answer that? Since
sure.
I wrote it out.
Thank
you, Ethan, for the question. The 137 men from the 20th Connecticut are listed as coming from New Haven. Weston lists only one. That may be because Weston is Fairfield County Regiment, and the Fairfield County Regiment was the 17th Connecticut.
It's not because people from Weston are anti-American.
No,
okay,
no.
good.
Weston's the Gold Coast. The Valley's the cheap seats.
Okay.
We're like the old Milltown, right?
So Weston didn't.
Lost sheep.
What?
Lost sheep.
Lost sheep. Yeah, no, we're the old mill towns over there. But Weston is Fairfield County, and the regiment that came out of Fairfield County was the 17th Connecticut, also here at Gettysburg. And if you're interested in that, shameless promotion.
Go.
I have a new book out called We Fought at Gettysburg on the 17th Connecticut at Gettysburg.
By the way,
numerous.
Yeah, go ahead.
Numerous first-hand accounts never before published, and many, many photographs of the men of the regiment never before published.
To show you what a good friend I am, I was on another podcast the other day called Three Guys Podcast.
Oh.
I think, yeah. And they talk about whatever. They just find interesting people, talk to them, and hear their stories. So they're not necessarily a history podcast. But we were talking about the battle, and I read an excerpt from your book, and I named it and everything. So
Thank
hopefully
you very
that
much. And you have been a good friend. I really enjoyed being on the podcast when the book came out. It was really enjoyable.
Yeah, no, and it's very good. Folks, if you haven't gotten it, you need to get a hold of it, because it's just the soldiers' accounts. I mean, you give a little background here and there, but for the most part, it's the soldiers' accounts. They tell the story. And I used your book and Stephen Evangelista's book about
Steve. Yes, I know Steve
Brown
very
Bounce
well.
Battery.
Yep,
and
very well.
both. I love that format of just letting the soldiers tell the story, or in Stephen's case, each chapter is a biography of the members of the unit, and it's really cool.
Yep.
All right, continue then. Are you done with that one?
Okay, yeah, I'm done. If you're interested in New Haven, however, the 27th Connecticut is most closely associated with New Haven itself. And they were also at Gettysburg. They were the smallest regiment in the Army of the Potomac. They came onto the field after being decimated at Chancellorsville. They came onto the field with approximately 75 men, lost 51% of that number in the wheat field. And ironically, the smallest regiment in the Army of the Potomac at Gettysburg has the most monuments. So 27th Connecticut has 5. So that's just my useless trivia about Connecticut.
Okay. And then he has a follow-up. Also, was the regiment deployed as a kind of half-assed speed bump or artillery observation force during the Pickett Pettigrew assault?
So we talked about that a little earlier. Got a kind of question about this half-assed speed bump comment, but yes, they were used as artillery observation, as we talked about, on Culp's Hill, and they were in reserve behind General Meade's headquarters during the Pickett Pettigrew charge.
Yeah, I'm in touch with Ethan off the air, and he has a way with words. So that's where that. All right, Jeffrey Caravella says, most of what I recall regarding the 20th Connecticut on July 2nd revolves around their action on Culp's Hill upon the 12th Corps' return to the Union right. What was their experience like in the hours between their departure from Culp's Hill and their eventual return?
Marching.
Jeff, you said re-arrival. It's return. Go ahead.
Marching. They marched to the left.
Right.
Got down to the Trossel farm after dark. They marched back again, got back to Culp's Hill at 4 a.m. on the third day.
Now, we were joking before about them going shopping at the outlets. They didn't make it that far down, but they didn't turn by Mulligan McDuffers to go to the south end of the field right away. They kept going past it. Is that correct?
No, that was John Geary's people. The 20th Connecticut, I believe, made that turn and went across Granite Schoolhouse Road and then up and over the ridge and then straight down off the ridge to the Trossel farm.
Oh, so I'm getting them confused. They're in Williams' division, not Geary's division.
Correct.
I'm sorry. I was under the wrong impression. Forgive me, ladies and gentlemen. Okay, so marching. So, but Williams' division didn't have that problem. So why were they spending all that time marching? Was it just traffic jams, or?
And it's after dark. There's no street lights.
You're talking about coming back.
Both ways.
But it wasn't dark.
They're going to leave in the late afternoon of the 2nd.
Right.
By the time they get down to the Trossel farm, it is dark.
Okay, gotcha. Gotcha. And also those roads that they would have taken, they're not the only troops on those roads. You've got troops coming back both ways.
That land between the 20-town road and the Baltimore Pike, that was all the reserve area. And
Right.
there's field hospitals out that way, too.
Yeah,
So
you've got the artillery reserve there. You've got not anymore, but the 5th Corps was there before moving. I mean, it's kind of like Grand Central Station there. You got the Spangler Farm.
Central clearing area.
Yeah, exactly. Okay. All right. Terry Bungie, I believe is how you pronounce it. It's a new name to me, but welcome, Terry. He says, or maybe she, I don't know. It could be either one. I would like to ask regarding the 20th that according to Brigades of Gettysburg by Brad Gottfried, the colonel of the 20th, William Wooster, claimed the 20th Connecticut had been chosen as the regiment to move in advance of the brigade to reconnoiter and attempt to retake some breastworks was because they had been well tried at Chancellorsville. The 123rd New York had not been, and the 5th Connecticut and 46th PA were not equal in numbers to do the work. Is that a fair reflection or just some good PR on behalf of his regiment? That's a good question.
I'm inclined to say that that's kind of a sidebar of the action out there. I think the 20th Connecticut was chosen to get as close to the Confederates as possible to do that artillery call. So not so much that they're by themselves going to push any Confederates out, but they have been tried, obviously, at Chancellorsville, and they did have some good numbers. By the time the battle is over here, the 20th Connecticut has lost 5 men killed and 28 wounded.
It's not very heavy casualties.
Not heavy casualties.
Okay.
No.
So one of the lucky ones.
You could put it that way. You want to call that lucky?
Well, I mean, compared to what it could have been, I guess,
Sure.
compared to everybody else. Okay, Grant O'Brien says, my question is related to Wooster's threat to the artillery at Gettysburg, where he said he would turn his men around and charge the batteries if they continue to hit his men. Were there any other instances in the war where a commander made a threat like this because of friendly fire? I can only imagine there were. There had to have been, right? You don't want your men being shot by your own men, you know?
Yeah.
I would imagine that would have shot a few people.
Yeah. I mean, I guess we'd have to get into the nitty-gritty of other battles and read firsthand accounts to find these stories. But I would just imagine, knowing human beings, that there'd have to be somebody else. He couldn't be the only guy out of the millions of people who fought in the war to do that. That would be my guess, Grant. Good question, though. John Calcagni says, I don't really have a question, but anything George Warner would be great.
We talked about him.
His story is so incredible. His humility. Thank you. His humility and patriotism, and even though armless, still persevered in life. Carolyn, you have a comment that you wrote in here.
Yeah, I think we talked a lot about George. He never lost his joie vivre, or however.
Joie de vivre.
Joie de vivre.
You didn't study French in high school, did you?
No. No. He lived a very long life.
Just say lust for life, or it made me snort.
You snorted.
No, I know you made me snort.
Okay, so I can't speak French. Anyway, we're a valley girl.
I know valley girls don't know French.
And anyway, he was really well regarded, well known. His nephew is very well known to us, and quite a character, an enjoyable one.
Yeah.
I think
You'll have to bring him down sometime and have him on the show.
Oh yeah, we could have Mark on the show. We'll have Peter on the show too.
My.
His brother-in-law.
My brother-in-law.
Oh, that will be a treat to behold.
Why is that?
Oh, you may find out if you're very serious about the invitation.
Of course I am. Yeah.
Lose control here.
That'd be fun. I like people like that.
It's like this Three Stooges meets the Marx Brothers. I don't know. Anyway. But yes, George is certainly a very compelling story, and a very heartfelt one. And if you have any questions, email me or Jim.
Sure.
Okay. How would they do that?
Well, I'll give you my email.
There you go. Go ahead.
civanoff@sbcglobal.net.
And that's Ivanoff, 2 F's, not a V at the end.
Right. Correct.
All right. And then you?
Jim.Connery.lbg193 @gmail.com.
There you go. If you missed it, rewind. All right, 6 questions, Lentz. He's recovering from his accident, and he's got 4 questions, so he's not fully recovered yet. But let's go through these questions here. Number 1, is there anything unique, such as how it is facing, about the monument of the 20th Connecticut?
Well, the general rule was for the veterans to put their monuments on their most forward fighting position and face the direction of the attack.
Okay.
The 20th monument, like the 17th monument, like the 27th monument up on Brook Avenue, they're basically the same structure, same layout, same presentation.
Right.
So,
it was the 20th Connecticut was erected on Culp's Hill, was erected in 1885, so relatively early in the monument period. It's called a sarcophagus style monument. If you look at it, it looks like a sarcophagus.
Yeah.
The 17th Connecticut is very similar. 27th is a newer style. I call it more like a tombstone style. But the
which one you looking at?
The one on Brook
Avenue?
The one on Brook.
Yeah.
The square one. The one the state paid for.
That's right.
Yeah.
I'm trying to picture
More
it.
generic.
But if you look at the 20th Connecticut, there's I probably have a picture of it somewhere. There's a very distinct look of a sarcophagus.
Yeah,
so it's one of the older style monuments. And it was that a Curtis monument from Stratford, Connecticut? I think it might have been.
Yes.
And
Curtis' name is on the bottom.
Yep.
Same thing on the 17th.
Yes, correct. So that's about it for that style of monument and its position. I believe so. That's the most unique thing I can say about it. It's one of the older monuments. It's a sarcophagus style monument erected in 1885. Oh, and George Warner was the man who unveiled it by sitting on what we call Warner's Rock.
Right.
You can sit today and get your picture taken just like
And the picture that was
George
taken
Warner.
of the dedication itself is actually taken from just above the monument. The cameraman was on the breastwork
Pointing
line,
down.
so he's looking down at basically what you can't see from the road.
Okay, gotcha.
backside.
Right.
Number 2, the 20th Connecticut had a long service after Gettysburg. Why then did the veterans choose to place their monument at Gettysburg? So they have no monuments anywhere else?
Well,
No, they do at
there's
Orchard
one
Knob.
Chattanooga, Orchard Knob.
What are you talking about, Mikey?
Listen, Gettysburg was the big show. If
Yeah.
you could put a monument at Gettysburg, you certainly would do so.
Yeah.
And, it often, I think a lot of these guys felt it was their finest hour. Even those of long combat service, like the 20th Connecticut, which fought both in the Eastern and Western theaters. I just think that Gettysburg was the pinnacle of what they viewed as their service.
That sounds reasonable. Number 3, one of the things that annoys me is that importance in the battle is connected to how many casualties a command suffers. That's a good point.
Mm-hmm.
In your opinion, do you think the 20th Connecticut served an important role despite having relatively light casualties?
Absolutely.
Sure.
Of course.
Sure they did.
It's forward,
just the fact that they did the forward observation, that's new.
By
It's
itself,
innovative.
it is-
and it was
innovative.
helpful.
Yep.
Once Wooster, corrected. Number 4, finally. This one is a less serious question, but did William Wooster have some of the best facial hair in the Army?
Yes, Michael, yes.
I like to
We
think so.
call them Worcester whiskers.
And at least once a year, I'll fill in my face with it.
Really?
He does. Jim does
Clean
grow
chin
them
and then everything else covered.
occasionally.
Did you
Yeah.
did you have that when I met you over the winter when Carolyn
Yes.
brought you in?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah, I feel like you did.
Yes.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
All right, and then let's see here. Carolyn, so you wrote in this Carolyn commenting asking for Michael. Do you want to discuss that now?
Yeah, Michael and I, by the way, Mike, miss you and hope everything's going well for you today. I was hoping you would be here, but I understand why you're not, and good luck today. Michael's distant cousin is Frank in parentheses, Talls, Tolles. He served with the 20th Connecticut at Gettysburg, and Francis's direct ancestor was a Revolutionary War general and patriot called David Wooster, who participated in the Danbury raid during the American Revolution up in Connecticut. And I said I would ask Jim for Michael. Was there any family relationship between David Worcester and William Burr Worcester?
And it's likely that they are connected. The Worcester family and the Burr family have long tales that go all the way back in Connecticut history, particularly through the Revolution.
Yeah.
And
Michael was pretty fascinated by this because isn't it great to have an ancestor that fought in the Civil War at Gettysburg under William Burr Worcester, and then another ancestor who also fought under Revolutionary War General David Worcester.
And a lot of people don't know this either, that one of Worcester's aides had a speech impediment, and he would say, "Yes, Colonel Worcestershire," and so
that
then
must have been Buckingham.
Later, Worcester went on to invent Worcestershire sauce.
Yes, Worcestershire. Worcestershire.
The truth's getting away with a good story.
Exactly.
Yeah.
All right, Chris Appel, I think it is. Welcome, Chris. Don't recognize that name either, but thank you for coming along. This is sort of a chicken or the egg type of question. But was it the artillery spotting that led to the friendly fire, or was it friendly fire that eventually led to the spotting? I always thought the spotting was a way to reduce short rounds, but recently read that it was being in close proximity with the enemy in order to spot that led to casualties like George Warner. Thanks for any clarification. Also, are there any other regiments whose cumulative fighting over July 1st through 3rd matches the sustained fighting done by units like the 20th Connecticut on Culp's Hill during the morning of the 3rd? So the first question, chicken or the egg?
Well, I would say, you're out there and you're out in front and you're spotting and you have to move forward. And by dint of moving forward closer to the enemy to conduct that spotting, you are going to come under the trajectory of friendly fire. I think that's pretty inevitable.
And also keep in mind, we talked earlier about the tree cover and all the smoke out there. Now, maybe the artillery people can see the flag. Maybe they can't. All they know is that they've got to launch trajectory.
And can we also point out that the sun isn't up when they start?
Correct.
There's light, but it's not full
folks don't know
sunrise.
Daylight savings time yet.
Right. But, I mean, you're going to need somebody to tell you what you're hitting because you can't make out what you're looking at.
That's right.
And you got the smoke, like you said, if it's still lingering from the night before. Yeah. So what are you saying? Chicken or the egg? Which came first? The spotting or
I think the spotting came first.
I agree.
Yeah.
All right. And then the second question, are the other regiments whose cumulative fighting over 1st through 3rd match that of the 20th and other Culp's Hill units?
Well, I would be inclined to say it's the regiments of the brigade once the 20th Connecticut moves forward, and it's not long after that when the rest of the brigade is ordered to get down there and move forward as well. So they're all going to be slogging through that swamp at Spangler Spring to try and dislodge the Confederates up in front of them. One regiment alone isn't going to do that.
Right. No. Rick Scarce, do we have a good idea where exactly the advanced position of the 20th took on the advanced position the 20th took on July 3rd was located? Visiting that area of the battlefield today, are there landmarks that will help us find where they were? Are there soldier accounts about the experiences in that position? Both friend and foe made life difficult for them. I'm amazed they were not cut off from the 12th Corps line.
So we talked about that earlier, too. Like my recollection from 10 years ago of getting out there in that field and walking through the brush and the shrubbery and eventually finding a low stone wall that bordered the swampy area. And based on maps we've seen with the little rectangular black blocks they put on the maps, I believe that's where they planted the flag and then called in the artillery.
Okay. Pete Vermillier says, on the morning of July 3rd, they experienced some of the longest sustained action of any regiment at Gettysburg. But how would you describe that fighting? Heavy skirmishing, reconnaissance in force, something different?
No, I think it's pretty much Napoleonic style. They're going to move through the swamp with their sister regiments and just try to attack uphill to help get the Confederates out of the area around Pardee Field.
Okay.
Can I just say something about Peter? Peter is a Connecticut historian. It's very nice.
Okay.
He's a Connecticut historian. He's from Litchfield County. That's Litchfield County and
more
the
money,
Gold Coast.
quiet
and
well.
here we are in the old Mid Valley. But anyway, Peter is a great guy. I just saw him at the American Battlefield Trust National Teachers Conference in Baltimore. Hope he's doing well. He's getting ready to go back to school up in Litchfield County. And he's got a book coming out on Litchfield County in the Civil War. He's a great guy, and I can't wait for your book to come out, Pete, and it's great to hear from you.
There you go. All right. And then finally, Stephen Byers says, can you share the story of George W. Warner and the monument dedication? So we touched on that.
We did.
But go into more if you have more to share.
We've got the picture of the dedication, and in the foreground to the right center is Colonel Worcester and Warner sitting on what we call Warner Rock, off to the left a little bit. So it was a typical monument dedication service. The monument was covered with a drape, and we had a pulley system rigged and tied around Warner's waist, and at the appropriate moment, he just walked away, and up went the drape, and there's the monument.
Okay.
And
there were a number of people. I remember a lot of women in that picture.
Yeah. Many of the guys had their wives with them. I just recently saw something on the internet where somebody had identified an ancestor with his wife there. I should probably email you that. And but Warner would perform this service again for the great dedication at the East Rock Monument in New Haven, amid many, we talked about this too, amid many Civil War celebrities who came into New Haven for the unveiling.
There were a lot of veterans.
There were a lot of veterans. Very well regarded. His story was very well known. And he was indeed a real part of the fabric of the veteran experience in Connecticut after the Civil War.
All right, and now let's see here, ladies and gentlemen. Let's see if
we're going to
anybody...
ask about books because I want to talk
Go ahead.
about
You got
Philo.
some books. Well, you know what we'll do? We'll end it with that so that people have that fresh in their mind at the end.
Okay.
I just want to see if anybody has participated in our commenting question here, and forgive me for squinting. So what I'm going to do is just spare the audience and make them look at you guys.
Oh.
Okay, let's see. Epic Gamer Chair. Yes, sir. Yes, new chair. Thanks to John Reynolds. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, John. All right, let's see. Excellent show. This is great. Dan Sickles is the greatest American to have ever walked the earth or hobbled on the earth.
How can you say that? He didn't have a leg to stand on.
Just here. Oh, here's Casey Turbin says, just here to shout out the Carolyn Ivanoff fan club.
Casey! We just saw each other at Jim Hessler's
he was there for that. Yeah.
Conference over in Harrisburg, and it was excellent.
I wanted to go to it, but of course I found out about it too late, and I had something already that I committed to, but yeah.
And it was great seeing Casey. Thank you, Casey.
All right, so let's see. JK Cinema, not a question, just stating facts. Dan Sickles, literally the coolest. Okay, this is about Dan Sickles.
How does Sickles take over every conversation?
Because you know why. This look. He says he's the Fonzie of the 1800s.
Oh, I love that. That's really true.
Really?
Did he have
Fonzie
a
was cool.
jacket?
No, he didn't. He had no leg. No, listen. People love to talk about Sickles, even when Sickles isn't relevant to the conversation. And what can I say?
He's just a rock star.
Well.
The rock star of the Gettysburg. But I like that Fonzie
you like that
comparison. I love that.
To Sickles?
Yeah.
It's an insult to Fonzie.
You're right. It is.
God.
I love it.
All right. So no one's really caught on there with the question thing, but that's okay. It's a new feature, so you'll get used to it sooner or later. Maybe we'll give you some warnings or something like that about what we're talking about so you can formulate the questions better, but it'll work. But anyway. You have some books you want to recommend before we go.
There was a question about what would be recommended if you were interested in the in Connecticut regiments or the 20th Connecticut. First, I would say the 20th Connecticut regimental history is listed or rated as critically one of the best regimental histories for Connecticut regiments. It was written by John Whiting Storrs, who was a poet and photographer in Derby, Connecticut, knew most of these men personally and had access to their diaries and their letters, honored the regiment with his writing of this regimental history, used for a great part of the regimental Major Philo Buckingham's memoirs. Now, we didn't talk much about Philo Buckingham, but all-around great guy. His house is still in Seymour by St. Augustine Church. I go by it all the time. And Philo Buckingham was an all-around decent officer and person. And his diary was pretty accurate, not so much self-serving, and forms the basis of the regimental history. Just a funny story about Philo Buckingham when we talked about how Chancellorsville really seared a lot of the regiments that took part in it. Philo Buckingham was in the thick of the battle. He was conferring with Worcester and Alpheus Williams, General Williams, when suddenly a stray shot blew his hat off with what looked like part of his hair. No one in the regiment realized or suspected that Philo was terribly bald, and the shot took away his hat, and with it the wig he was never seen without. And after that shocking episode, Philo just gave up on the wig, and if you see pictures of him now, he's always bald, never went back to wearing the wig, but it shocked everybody, including General Williams and General Worcester.
That's great.
But this crazy story is about the fact that we're not so very much different than our Civil War ancestors with regard to our human vanity.
Yeah.
You might look good in a wig with the
hat.
You have a hat. Yeah, you might.
Well,
look
I'll
really
try
good.
one. I'll get one of those hats that come with the hair.
Yeah, just as long as nobody shoots it off you in the midst of combat.
Right. I could never take it off in public.
We're not so very different from our Civil War ancestors with regard to our vanity, and many of us wear wigs today, and certainly most women and some men still color their hair. And it reminds me of an archaeological dig at Camp Nelson, I believe, that was pretty recent. It was 2019, where they excavated part of the camp, especially where the camp photographer was taking pictures. And there was a huge trash pit next to the photography studio, which was full of hair dye bottles. So
you told us that on the Clara Barton episode, didn't you? Yeah, okay.
So apparently, Clara Barton notably dyed her hair into her late 80s, possibly until she almost at the time of her death at 90 in 2012. So if
she died in 2012?
I'm sorry, 2012. Oh yeah, wow.
Boy, she was old.
Long-lived lady.
Yeah, like her years must have been 5 years long.
1912.
Okay, 1912.
And that always amazes me because when you look at a lot of Civil War CDVs, I think Beauregard is a notable one. Like, people comment how his hair went from almost totally dark to almost totally white in the matter of a few months. Yeah. Well, I suspect he just stopped dyeing his hair.
Yeah.
But
it's not practical in the field. So
that's my little, we're not so very different from those who have gone before.
Absolutely. There was one question that was snuck in after I gave up on the questions. I'll give it to him. Balthazar says, what is the best way, and this is a good question, to better understand the Culp's Hill fighting? Been studying the war for years and going to the field, but still struggling to truly understand the July 2nd through 3rd fighting. Good question, because Culp's Hill can be confusing, just like the wheat field is confusing. Sure. Culp's Hill is like the wheat field of the right for me. It's confusing.
I have two answers, if I may.
You may.
Butt in. John Archer's book, his small guidebook, is excellent. I think I might have it here, Matt, if you want to show that.
Sure.
And the other one I would say are the maps of Phil Lano.
Phil Lano's map book. You got to get that.
I find...
Culp at Gettysburg. This is the John Archer book.
Yep.
It's very thin.
Yep.
It's a guidebook, so it's look at all the
resource.
markings on this. Look at that.
Yeah.
She really studies. You can tell you're an educator.
Yeah. Okay.
And but yeah, so it's got basically like a walking tour, right? You can just walk around and read what it has.
I think this book and Lano, coupled with Lano's maps and the commentary on Lano's maps, really helped me understand a lot more about Culp's Hill, which I also found extremely confusing.
I also use Brad Gottfried's maps of Gettysburg as well. That's sometimes a little easier to carry around if you're going out on the battlefield, unless, of course, you have a Von Dettem & Co.
Oh, yes.
Lano Atlas map bag.
With an 11th Corps.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. You can get your Corps badges on. Yeah, whatever you want. Absolutely. Then you would get that through sending an email to vondettemandco at gmail.com. Yeah. Okay. Sorry, I forgot about it.
And this is the other Connecticut resource. If you are into Connecticut regiments, not just Gettysburg, but this is Volunteer Sons of Connecticut. It's an absolute must resource for you Connecticut fans if you're interested. And it has every regiment of Connecticut, including our own 29th USCT. Not USCT.
29th Connecticut. All right. Well, so thank you guys very much for coming on here. Welcome into the fold, Jim. I hope you come back and do more. You're welcome anytime. If you have an idea of a show that you want to do, you don't have to wait for an invitation. You can just let us know.
Great.
And we'll set it up because we always need material and people love learning. So it doesn't matter what it is. Even if it's something we've already done, we could always handle another perspective. Carolyn, thank you very much for coming on. Always a pleasure to have you.
Yep.
And
great conversation.
For the guinea pigs in the audience here watching live, thank you very much for your assistance and for your comments about sickles and all that other stuff.
Oh, yeah.
We'll tweak this whole situation. Otherwise, that's about it, everybody. Thank you very much for your listening and your support. Patreon.com/Addressing Gettysburg if you want to ask questions. And that's it. Talk to you next time. All right. Goodbye, everybody, on the video. Hey everyone, before you go, I would like to highlight a friend and supporter of the show, The Badge Maker, your source for authentic Civil War Corps badges and more. Purchase handcrafted, historically accurate Civil War Corps badges from all corps. Discover a vast collection of military and civilian insignias of various kinds. Experience the exclusive service of custom hand-stamped reproduction ID discs. At his website, CivilWarCorpsBadges.com, The Badge Maker brings history to life with precision and passion. Thanks for listening.
Our hearts so stout have got us famed, for soon 'tis known from whence we came. Wherever we go, they dread the name of Gary Owen in glory. Instead of spa, we'll drink down ale and pay the reckoning on the